There are two kinds of dangerous men in this world, the kind who explodes and the kind who doesn't. I am the second kind. And if you think that's the safer option, you can't imagine what I did. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Lucas Merritt, retired. I am 58 years old, father of one, husband to the most elegant woman who ever agreed to tolerate my cooking. I coach a little league team on Saturdays. I drink my coffee black, and according to my son Calvin, I am, and I quote, too calm for a normal person. He meant it as a joke. He has no idea how right he was. Now let me tell you about the day of Calvin's wedding, because that is where this story begins. Not with a bang, not with a scene, with a little tube of superglue and a chair. It was a Saturday in late September, the kind of day that looked like it had been designed by a wedding planner. Golden light, mild breeze, the whole performance. The venue was a converted estate outside the city, white tents, string lights, 4-tier cake. Vivian had cried twice already, and we hadn't even sat down. I had stepped away briefly to check on the seating arrangements near the family table. That's when I saw her, Autumn, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, standing over the chair designated for Vivian, the one with the small ivory ribbon tied to the back, marking it as reserved for the mother of the groom. She had something in her hand, small, orange cap, superglue. She was pressing it, deliberately, unhurriedly, into the fabric of the seat cushion. And standing approximately 4 feet behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room like a security guard who'd been told to look casual, was my son, Calvin, my blood. I stood there for exactly 3 seconds. I know because I counted. 1, 2, 3. Then I turned around, walked back to where Harlan was standing by the bar, accepted the glass of water he handed me, and said, "You know what, Harlan? It's a beautiful day. You've got that face. The face you had right before you fired Patterson without raising your voice. The face you had when the city council tried to lowball the contract. That face." I smiled and sipped my water. "Go enjoy the cocktail hour. Now, I need you to understand something about Vivian. My wife is not a dramatic woman. She is precise, warm, and deeply dignified. She spent 3 months helping plan this wedding. She alterations her dress twice trying to get it right. She wrote Calvin a 4-page letter the night before the wedding that she'd never let me read. But I heard her crying softly at the desk at 2 a.m., and I knew every word in it was love. She deserved that chair. So I went back, quietly, calmly. I found one of the venue staff, a young man named, I think, Marcus, and I said to him in my most relaxed voice, "I need you to swap 2 chairs at the family table. That one," I pointed to Vivian's chair, "goes to the seat across from it, and that one comes here. Can you do that in the next 10 minutes without making it obvious?" He blinked. "Sir, there's $40 in it for you." He blinked again. Then the chair moved. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give them that much. Calvin stood at the altar looking like the best version of himself, and for a moment, just a moment, I forgot. I forgot the tube. I forgot the casual stance. I forgot the 4 feet of comfortable distance between a son and his conscience. I watched him watching Autumn walk down the aisle, and I thought, he loves her. That part I believed. What I could not reconcile, what sat in my chest like a stone in still water, was how a man who loved a woman could stand watch while she humiliated his mother. Not confront it, not stop it, stand watch. Harlan leaned over during the vows and whispered, "You doing all right?" "Perfectly fine. You haven't blinked in 4 minutes. I'm being present." The reception began. Music, laughter, champagne. Vivian was radiant. She danced with Calvin during the mother-son song, and I watched her face, open, full, completely unsuspecting. And I made myself a quiet promise right there on that dance floor. Not today, not here. Not in front of her. Today was still hers. I sat down at the family table. Across from me, in the chair that had originally been designated for Vivian, now occupied by Autumn, everything appeared perfectly normal. She was laughing with Brooke, her maid of honor, fixing her veil, glowing like brides do. Then Stuart, the MC, took the microphone. Now Stuart was one of those MCs who fancied himself a comedian. Big voice, bigger ego, constant crowd work. He'd been mildly amusing during cocktail hour he was about to become entirely by accident. The most important man in my evening. All right, all right, all right. Before we get into the toasts, I want to do something special. A little moment for our bride and groom. Autumn, sweetheart, would you stand up for us, give everyone a proper look at that dress? The room cheered. Autumn smiled that practiced beautiful smile. She stood. And then, the sound. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. In that half-second pocket of quiet between the cheering dying down and the next sound beginning, there it was. A tearing. Fabric. Clean and decisive. Autumn froze. The smile stayed on her face. God bless her. But her eyes went somewhere else entirely. Somewhere internal. Somewhere panicked. Her hand moved instinctively behind her, and whatever she felt there made the smile flicker just once, like a light with a loose wire. Brooke was at her side in seconds, whispering something, body blocking the view. Stewart, to his credit, pivoted smoothly. Beautiful. Absolutely stunning. And the moment passed for most of the room, but not for Calvin. I was watching Calvin. He had gone very still. His jaw had tightened. His eyes cut across the table, not to Autumn, not to Brooke, to me, and I looked right back at him. Steady, warm, smiling. I raised my glass slightly, the way you do when you're toasting someone across a crowded room. He looked away first. Later that night, Harlan found me outside on the estate steps, jacket off, loosened tie, watching the string lights sway. Lucas, Harlan. We were quiet for a long moment, the way men our age know how to be quiet. Then he said, "You switched the chairs, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. I don't know what you're talking about. Lucas. It's a beautiful night, Harlan. He laughed, a short, low sound, and shook his head slowly. What are you going to do? I picked up my glass. I looked out at the lights. Nothing tonight, I said. Tonight belongs to Vivian. Harlan nodded slowly. Then, after a beat, and tomorrow? I stood up, straightened my jacket, finished my drink. Tomorrow, I said, I will start paying attention. And that, right there, was the most dangerous thing I ever said at a wedding. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. Not colder, not distant, warmer. Because it's cold, people can prepare for. Cold, people can see coming. But warm lowers your guard. Warm makes you pour another drink and laugh a little too loud and forget, completely forget, that the man smiling across the table has been writing everything down. That was me. For 6 weeks after that wedding, the kindest, warmest, most attentive father-in-law you have ever seen in your life. God help them. It started the Monday after the wedding. Calvin called, which was already slightly unusual, because Calvin's standard communication style was a thumbs-up emoji and a voice note he'd clearly recorded while driving. But he called. Actual phone, actual ring, actual voice. Dad. Hey, Calvin. How's the honeymoon planning? Good, good. Autumn says hi. Tell her we say hi back. Your mother was asking about you both just this morning. Pause. A small pause. The kind that lasts half a second too long. Yeah, actually, Dad, about the wedding, the chair thing. Silence. Autumn's dress got caught on something and... Oh, that. Calvin, nobody even noticed. These things happen at weddings. Listen, are you and Autumn free for dinner Sunday? Your mother wants to make her pot roast. You know how she gets when she hasn't fed somebody in a while. Yeah, we can do Sunday. Wonderful. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. You know your mother. I hung up, set the phone down on my desk, picked up the small leather notebook I had purchased the previous morning from the stationery shop on Clement Street. I opened it to the first page, wrote the date, then wrote, Calvin called, attempted to address the wedding incident, deflected when given the opportunity, did not apologize, did not explain, chose comfort over accountability. Sunday dinner confirmed. I capped the pen, closed the notebook, put it in the desk drawer beneath my old files, right next to the photograph. Because yes, there was a photograph. Here's something people forget about retired men with time on their hands. We notice things. During the cocktail hour before the ceremony, I had been standing near the entrance when one of the venue's photographers swept past me doing candid shots. Young woman, quick eye, good instincts. She'd been pointing her lens at the family tent area. I'd had a quiet word with her afterward, asked if she might share her full unedited gallery with me once she delivered to the couple. She'd said, "Of course. Do you want the link sent to?" Just a USB, physical copy. And, between us, she had looked at me slightly strangely. I had smiled my warmest smile. The USB arrived by courier 8 days later. I went through 412 photographs on a Tuesday afternoon with a cup of black coffee and found exactly what I was looking for on photo number 287, Autumn. The chair, the orange cap visible between 2 fingers, and Calvin, 4 feet back, watching the room. I printed it, placed it in a plain envelope, put it in the drawer. Then I called to invite them to Sunday dinner. Sunday came. Vivian made her pot roast, the kind that fills an entire house with a smell so good it almost makes you believe everything is fine. Almost. They arrived together, Autumn in a cream blouse, Calvin with a bottle of wine he'd clearly bought on the way over, because the price sticker was still half peeled on the bottom. I noted that. Not in the notebook, just in the catalog I was quietly building in the back of my mind. Dinner was warm. Genuinely warm. Vivian laughed. Autumn complimented the pot roast twice, which was the correct number of times. Calvin told a story about their first apartment that made us all laugh. And I sat there, at the head of my table, being the most engaged, most generous, most present version of Lucas Merritt I had ever performed. Because here is what I had decided. Somewhere between the estate steps and that Tuesday afternoon with 400 photographs, I was not going to confront. I was not going to accuse. I was not going to give either of them the gift of knowing what I knew. I was going to show up, consistently, generously, inescapably, because people who do ugly things in secret depend on one thing above everything else: distance. Distance lets the story they tell themselves stay clean. Distance lets them file it away under harmless prank, or she wouldn't have gotten hurt, or whatever comfortable lie lives in the space between what they did and who they think they are. I was going to remove the distance. Week 2, I offered to help Calvin with the financial paperwork for the new house they were purchasing. He hesitated. I insisted, warmly, casually, the way fathers do. He accepted, which meant I now had a clear picture of their finances, their timeline, and, most relevantly, I discovered they had applied for a loan using a reference letter they'd asked Calvin's uncle on Autumn's side to write. A letter that, upon reading, I noted contained a slightly embellished account of Calvin's employment history. I said nothing. I filed it. Week 3, Autumn mentioned at brunch. We were doing brunches now. Did I mention that? Yes, brunches. She mentioned casually that she and Calvin were thinking of asking Vivian to come off the shared family phone plan to simplify things. Vivian had laughed it off. I had smiled and written it down that evening, with the date, and the exact words as best I could recall them. Brunch. Autumn suggests removing Vivian from family plan. Framed as simplification, Vivian laughed. Autumn watched my face when she said it. That last part was important. She had watched my face, which told me the suggestion wasn't about the phone plan at all. It was a test. She was checking the perimeter, seeing if I was paying attention. I gave her nothing, smiled, asked if anyone wanted more coffee. Harlan met me for lunch at the end of week 4. He pushed a menu aside, looked at me across the table and said, "You're doing the thing. I'm eating a sandwich, Harlan. You're doing the thing, Lucas. The Patterson thing. The city council thing. How long have you been collecting?" I took a bite of my sandwich. "Collecting what?" "Lucas, it's a good sandwich. You should order." He leaned back in his chair and studied me the way old friends do, like they're reading a book they've read before, and they already know how it ends. "Does Vivian know anything?" "Vivian is happy. Vivian is having brunches with her daughter-in-law and talking about Christmas plans, and she has not been asked to think about a single ugly thing." I set down my sandwich. That's by design. Harlan was quiet for a moment. "What's the end game, Lucas?" I picked up my coffee, considered the question with genuine thoughtfulness. Calvin is a good man who made a very bad choice. Maybe 2. Maybe more. I'm still counting. I paused. I raised him better. And somewhere inside him, he knows that. What I'm building isn't a punishment, Harlan. Then what is it? I looked at him steadily. It's a mirror, I said. I'm going to hold it up so close that he can't look away. And when he finally sees himself clearly, really sees himself, I want to be the father who is present enough to hand it to him. Harlan stared at me for a long moment. Then he picked up his menu and said quietly, "Lord have mercy on that boy." Week 6. Sunday dinner again. Calvin was relaxed now. Noticeably, measurably relaxed. The dinners had softened him. The brunches had softened Autumn, too. She laughed more freely, touched Calvin's arm at the table, called me Lucas instead of the oddly formal Mr. Merritt she'd used in the early months. They had decided, somewhere in those 6 weeks, that I didn't know, that I was just a warm, retired father who was grateful for their company. It almost made me sad. After dinner, while Vivian and Autumn were in the kitchen, Calvin and I sat in the living room. He was loose with the wine, comfortable in the armchair he'd claimed since adolescence. He looked at me with something that might have been affection, real affection, and said, "Dad, I want you to know I'm glad we've been doing this, the dinners. It means a lot." I looked at my son, this man I had coached and driven and lectured and loved for 31 years. "It means a lot to me too, Calvin." He nodded, smiled, looked into his glass, and I thought, there he is, there's the man I raised. And I thought, what a shame he's only this man when he thinks he's safe. I stood up, stretched, walked to the bookshelf to refill my glass, and as I passed the side table I opened the small drawer, just slightly, just enough, where I had that evening for the first time placed the notebook in plain sight. Calvin didn't see it, but I knew he would, eventually. That was the thing about patience. It didn't rush. It just waited for the right Sunday. And the right Sunday was coming. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you for real. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Lucas, just confront them. Say what you saw. Let it out. And I understand that impulse. I do. There is a version of this story where I flip a table, deliver a monologue, and storm out into the night while violins play. But that man, the table-flipping man, gives them the power. See, the moment you explode, you become the story. Oh, Lucas overreacted. Lucas made a scene. Poor Calvin. His father is so dramatic. Suddenly the superglue is a footnote and my reaction is the headline. No. I wanted to be the headline and the story and the last thing they thought about before they fell asleep. So I waited. And I prepared. And I set the most elegant trap a quiet man has ever constructed in 30 years of knowing exactly when to speak and when to simply let the room go silent. It began unraveling, for them, on a Thursday. Autumn called Vivian, which she did regularly now. They had developed what I can only describe as a functional warmth, the kind that exists between two women who aren't quite friends, but have agreed to try. Vivian was always gracious, always genuine. That was Vivian. The call was about Christmas. Where would they spend it? Whose family? The usual negotiations young couples have that quietly reveal everything about how they see the hierarchy of their life. Vivian came to find me in my study afterward, slightly deflated in that way she got when she was trying not to show something. She wants to spend Christmas with her parents, in Phoenix. I looked up from my desk. Vivian stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, and for just a moment, one unguarded, heartbreaking moment, she looked exactly like what she was. A woman trying very hard to be understanding about something that quietly stung. Vivian, I'm fine. It's fine. They're young, they're building their... Vivian, come sit down. She sat. I took her hand across the desk, and I looked at my wife of 33 years, and made a decision I had been approaching slowly the way you approach something fragile. I need to show you something. I opened the drawer. I placed the notebook on the desk between us. Then the envelope. Then, from the locked box I kept beneath my old case files, I took out the printed photograph and placed it face up in the center of everything. Vivian looked at it. She was very still for a very long time. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were not wet. They were clear. That particular kind of clear that comes after something you half suspected has just been confirmed in full daylight. How long have you known since the wedding, Lucas? Her voice was measured, quiet. That was 3 months ago. Yes. You sat across from her at 8 Sunday dinners. 9, actually. She stared at me. Then she looked back at the photograph. Then back at me. What are you going to do? I straightened the photograph carefully, squared the edges of the notebook against the desk. I'm going to invite them to dinner on Sunday, I said. And I'm going to end it. Sunday arrived the way consequential days always do, unremarkable on the surface. Mild weather. Vivian made roast chicken this time, not pot roast. Small detail. Intentional. The pot roast was a comfort meal. Roast chicken was simply dinner. They arrived at 7. Calvin with his habitual, almost on-time energy. Autumn in a gray wrap dress. Both of them carrying the easy looseness of people who had fully convinced themselves the coast was clear. Calvin kissed his mother on the cheek. Autumn said the house smelled wonderful. Lance had apparently texted Calvin something funny on the drive over, because they were both still laughing about it when they came through the door. Good. Let them be relaxed. Dinner was pleasant. Conversation moved through the usual rooms. Work, the new house, a neighbor dispute Calvin found amusing. A show Autumn and Vivian had both apparently been watching. I ate. I listened. I asked questions. I laughed at the right moments. Vivian was extraordinary. If I live to be 100, I will never fully articulate the dignity of that woman sitting at that table, passing the breadbasket to the woman who had tried to humiliate her, and doing it with a grace so complete it looked like ease. She knew what was coming. She had agreed to it. She had, after a long quiet conversation Wednesday night, looked at me and said, "Don't destroy him, Lucas. Reach him. There's a difference." I had promised her I would try. After dinner, the table was cleared. Vivian brought coffee. Autumn was mid-sentence about something. A colleague, a promotion, something. When I stood up quietly, walked to the sideboard, and returned with a large manila folder, I set it on the table, centered, deliberately. The way you place something when you want everyone in the room to understand that its arrival is not accidental. The conversation stopped. Not immediately, Autumn finished her sentence on momentum alone, the way people do when they sense a shift but haven't confirmed it yet. Then she stopped, and looked at the folder, and looked at me. Calvin looked at the folder, then at me, then at his mother, and whatever he saw in Vivian's face completed a circuit somewhere behind his eyes. The color left him slowly, like a tide going out. I sat down, folded my hands on the table, and said, in the most conversational tone I possessed, "I thought we'd take a few minutes, just the 4 of us, before the evening ends." Silence. Calvin, you're a good man. I want to start there because I mean it, and because what I'm about to say has nothing to do with whether I love you. I do, without condition. I always will. I paused, but I watched you stand 4 feet behind your wife while she pressed superglue into your mother's chair at your wedding, and then I watched you spend 3 months hoping I hadn't. The room was so quiet I could hear the kitchen faucet dripping. Calvin opened his mouth, closed it. I opened the folder. Inside, organized, dated, clean, were the printed photograph, 12 pages of the notebook transcribed, the USB drive in a small labeled sleeve, documentation of the embellished loan reference letter, and a single handwritten page in my own writing. A timeline, 3 months of Sundays, every dinner, every brunch, every small calculated suggestion, every test of the perimeter. I slid it to the center of the table so they could both see. Autumn had gone very still, the particular stillness of someone whose internal monologue has just screeched to a halt. "I'm not a lawyer," I said pleasantly. "I'm not going to court. I'm not calling anyone's employer or contacting anyone's family. That is not what this is." I tapped the folder once, lightly. "This is a record. A clear, documented, organized record of a pattern of behavior that began before your wedding and continued through last Thursday's phone call to your mother." I looked at Autumn directly, gently, without heat. "You're intelligent, Autumn. You know exactly what's in here." She said nothing. Her jaw was tight, her eyes were, and I will give her this, not looking away. "Now," I leaned back slightly. "I have a copy of everything in this folder in a location that is not this house. My attorney has a letter, already written, already signed, that describes its contents and its purpose, not to be opened, not to be used." I paused. "Unless something changes." Calvin found his voice. It came out rough, stripped of its usual confidence. "Dad, I'm not finished." He stopped. "I spent 31 years teaching you that the measure of a man is not whether he makes mistakes. It's what he does when he's the only one in the room who knows he made one." I looked at my son. Really looked at him the way I hadn't let myself do in 3 months, because I knew if I did, I'd feel exactly this. "You knew what happened at that wedding, Calvin. You knew that night. You knew at every dinner. You sat in this house, in that chair, and you let your mother pour you coffee and talk about Christmas, and you said nothing." His eyes were wet. He wasn't bothering to hide it. Good. So here is what happens now. I closed the folder, slid it across the table, all the way across until it sat in front of Calvin. That copy is yours. I want you to take it home. I want you to read every page. And I want you to sit with what it feels like to see yourself documented by someone who loves you. Autumn spoke for the first time. Her voice was careful, controlled, and, to her credit, absent of the deflection I had half expected. What do you want from us, Lucas? I looked at her. I want you to understand that Vivian is not optional. She is not a figure to be managed or moved or quietly inconvenienced off the edges of your life. She is the woman who raised the man you married. I said it without anger, without performance, and I want you to understand that I see you, clearly, fully, and I am still sitting at this table offering you a way forward, because that is what Vivian asked me to do, and because I believe, on your best day, you're capable of being better than your worst one. The kitchen faucet dripped. Autumn looked at Vivian, and something moved across her face, not quite shame, not quite relief, something that lived in the complicated territory between the two. Vivian looked back at her steadily, and after a long moment said simply, I'd like us to try. Calvin called me the following Tuesday, early, 7:14 in the morning. He didn't start with hey or dad or anything I expected. He just said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't have an explanation that's good enough. I know that. I sat down in my desk chair, looked out the window at the early light. I know you are, son. The folder. His voice cracked slightly. Reading it, seeing it written out like that, I didn't realize how. He stopped, started again. How did you sit across from me all those Sundays? I thought about it honestly. Because you're my son, I said. And because I was hoping you'd get there yourself. You just needed a little more time than I expected. He laughed. The broken, humbled kind. You're terrifying, Dad. You know that? Your mother says I'm perfectly normal. Mom is the only saint in this family. Don't tell her that. Her head is the right size, and I'd like to keep it that way. He laughed again. Cleaner this time. More like himself. We talked for 40 minutes. The longest phone call we'd had in years. No emojis, no voice notes recorded in a moving car. Just a father and the son finding their way back to each other. One honest word at a time. That evening, Vivian found me on the back porch. She handed me a cup of coffee, sat beside me, and leaned her head lightly against my shoulder the way she had since 1991. We watched the yard go dark. After a while, she said, How do you feel? Like myself, I said. She laughed softly. Dangerous answer. She lifted her head, looked at me with those clear, knowing eyes. Lucas Merritt, she said quietly, you are the strangest, most patient, most infuriating man I have ever loved. I picked up my coffee. And yet, I said, you've never once been bored. She laughed, full and warm and real. And the porch light stayed on long after the yard had gone completely dark, because that's what quiet men do. They don't burn things down. They just make sure, very, very sure, that when the light finally comes on, there is absolutely nowhere left to hide. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.